First try.
Let's light it up! Animal test 6308. Animal hypostasis simulation. Animal test 6308.
Brace yourself. This is gonna hurt.
World record cracked. Hey YouTube, what's going on? Lionheart here, and on today's video, I'd like to talk about my first impressions on Hu Tao. So far, I'm pretty satisfied with her as a character. She's similar to Childe in a lot of ways, and if you've watched my content before or dropped by the Twitch channel, you know I'm a big fan of Childe and his gameplay. And you know, one of the ways that I actually think is most important is they're similar in their ability to serve as either a primary or burst DPS. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about the synergy. So Hu Tao's elemental skill, right, activates a steroid on Hu Tao, consumes some health, activates a steroid, and converts her damage into pyro, right? And then when you hit enemies with a charge attack, it will apply a blood blossom, right, a mark onto the enemy that on a duration will re-trigger pyro damage. Okay, Childe's very similar, right? Activates an elemental skill, deals hydro damage, applies a mark that then can trigger hydro damage later, right? You see the synergy. And the difference is that rather than losing health, though, he has to manage a cooldown, right? The longer he's in the stance, the longer the cooldown. So that's the challenge for Childe players. And then similarly on the elemental burst, right? Hu Tao has an elemental burst. It's an area nuke around her. Childe has an elemental burst. That's an area nuke around him in melee stance. And then it's got a different use in bow stance, but we're not going to talk about that in this video. And so they actually end up playing kind of similar in that role, in that you can focus all of your investment around that elemental burst and trying to make that really, really good, right? And hit for as much damage as possible. Or you can focus as being like a primary damage dealer, right? And doing a lot of damage with your elemental skill active, and then having people who can rotate in, right, on your team when you have downtime. For Childe, that's if you don't have high constellation, right, that's the cooldown, whatever period you have on cooldown. And for Hu Tao, it's about 7 seconds, I think, which I'll talk about a little later, but actually is not too bad. You don't even really notice it. It almost feels like 100% uptime, which is really cool. So they're very similar in their versatility in terms of being able to do roles, but there are actually a couple of important differences. One of them is that Hu Tao has some big nuking capability on her in comparison to Childe when comparing elemental skills, right? Hu Tao's elemental skill lets you use a charge attack, and that's how you apply your blood blossom, right? And the charge attack is like, yeah, like it just hits so hard. It hits really hard. It's almost like, you can almost think of, like, we just had Xiao release. You can almost think of her charge attack like Xiao's elemental skill, only it's a charge attack, which is crazy, right? Because Xiao, if you don't have constellations, can cast that ability only twice, and Hu Tao can charge, you know, as many times as she has stamina, right? So yeah, that's pretty impressive, and it deals a ton of damage, and then it applies a smart that also deals damage, and yeah, it just feels really, really good. But so that puts them in a different spot, right? Because Childe's doing a lot of very small hits for lower damage, where Hu Tao can do some big hits, and that's important because both of them are using elemental reactions in order to boost their damage, right? You're either melting or you're vaporizing to really increase your damage output. And so the bigger hit you can land, the more you can take advantage of that multiplier, right? So like what I mean is, like, if I'm using Childe, right, and I'm doing a bunch of like quick hits, or any character, right, who's an element doing a bunch of quick hits, right, and I trigger an elemental reaction, it's going to multiply these very small numbers, and then it's going to go on cooldown, right? Or if you can hit for a really big number and then you trigger an elemental reaction, you're going to get to take full advantage of that. And so actually, characters that hit for a lot of small hits that rely on elemental reactions are actually at somewhat of a disadvantage compared to characters who have bigger hits like Hu Tao does. So that's a pretty big advantage for her, and should make you feel a little bit more comfortable investing her. Look, in the footage here, she's Constellation 0. I haven't taken her up yet. I'm going to take her up on Twitch later today, but she's Constellation 0, and then the next time you see her on one of my videos, she'll be Constellation 6. I think that Constellation 0 feels really, really good. And let's just talk about, even before we get into the constellations, let's just talk about the pros, cons, and kind of like neutral things about Hu Tao that I feel like you're going to want to know and think about. Okay, so let's start with the pros, right? She has really, really high damage on her charge attacks, on her elemental burst, and on blood blossom. And that's important for the reasons I just discussed, right? When you're triggering elemental reaction, you want big damage numbers as the base that's getting multiplied, not small damage numbers, okay? She also has some team support talents and constellations. She has some team support capabilities via her talents and constellations that basically provide crit rate, right? So the talent gives you, I think it's 12% crit rate, something like 8 seconds. I'm just trying to recall off memory. And then if you get the constellation, it's another 12% crit rate buff, and that one I think is for 15 seconds, so it's longer. It's a little weird that they're actually different durations, but the general idea is that those buffs apply to your team, not to Hu Tao. And so what that does for you, and actually I think it's really nice, is it says that, hey, if you want to play Hu Tao as just a burst, not as a primary damage dealer, well, when you run her as a burst and you use her full kit and then pull off of her, your next character that you're going to play, whoever your primary damage dealer is going to have 24% extra crit rate that they didn't have before if she's C4, and if she's not C4, then 12%, right? That's pretty nice. That actually like can help you with stats on your gear. It can allow you to build a little bit more crit damage or make up for shortfall on crit rate. So it opens up on build flexibility for your other damage dealing character, and you almost always have at least 2 damage dealing characters on the team. So that's great, and that will help keep her viable into the future, right? Whenever we talk about like characters, people are like, is this character overpowered or not, right? The general idea is like an overpowered character is usually not a character that deals really high damage, though that obviously can happen. Most of the time it's a character that can do everything, right? It's a character that can deal high damage, can support, comes with a lot of utility, right? Bennett comes to mind as like a character that like qualifies as like that, right? Venti comes to mind, right, as a character that qualifies like that, right? Doesn't have the heal that Bennett has, but has some pretty crazy shred displacement utility in addition to damage, right? So those are the kind of characters that I feel like are like really strong and like at the top of their game in terms of like you're trying to think about what's overpowered or not. I don't think Hu Tao's that, but I do think Hu Tao is an exceptional damage dealer and can hit for very high damage. Maybe more comparable to like someone like Ganyu. Okay, so I think that's great. Also another pro is there's this really cool, if you sprint with her, and I probably did it earlier in the video, but I'm just running B-roll footage. If you sprint with her, you can actually like iframe teleport through things, so you can use the sprint to avoid missiles and like teleport through them, which is really cool. I mean, you could face tank them also with an iframe, but it's just looks cooler when you just kind of pass through them. And you can also do some no clipping through smaller enemies, right? You can get to the other side of them by sprinting. So I thought that was really cool and a nice touch that they did for her kit. And then also one other pro is that C6 is really only necessary for speedrunners. Yeah, I think that's important to note. Only necessary for speedrunners. So you don't need this crazy deep investment, right? I remember when Childe came out, a lot of people were very upset that like they felt like the way you could play Childe with C6 was so different than the way you play him without it, and it caused a lot of people to avoid his banner. And it's true, it does have a big change on playstyle. I don't think it was a reason necessary to avoid the banner, but did have a big change on his playstyle, right? C6 here, I think truly it's like a safety net, and otherwise it's really on there for speedrunners. People are going to play at very low health, trigger to get 100% crit rate, and build some crazy artifact set that's only crit damage, only elemental mastery, right? And they're going to hit these numbers that you're seeing, right? The 1.4 million that Nokhang hit, the 1.71 million that Starmie hit. I think that's the current record. And so you're going to see these crazy high numbers, right? But here's the thing. There's nothing with that much health in the game, so you can kill things without that, right? You can still have a great time without that. So I think that's a pro, personally. I think it's really good that a C6 is only applicable to people who are trying to do speed runs or who are really heavy spenders, where they'll have the value, where your average player won't need it and can still fully enjoy the character. And I think that's what you have here. Okay, so don't bait yourself that feeling you need to C6 a character because they're strong at base. I see this often, right? Somebody will be like, oh, the character's so good at C0, I gotta take it to C6. No, if the character is good at C0, you don't take it to C6 because it's good at C0. Save your money for a character who needs C6, right? And then you go in there. Okay, let's talk about some of the cons for Hu Tao. Right, first, keeping her below half health is necessary for optimal damage, and I think for a lot of players that's gonna feel like a chore. It's gonna be annoying to try and run around and deal with a character that you know, needs to stay below half health. It can be frustrating. You can't use healers that maybe you want to use that heal the whole team, right? So like a Jean, for example. You have to be careful about ground heals that you step onto. If they heal you too much, is that going to create a problem? And similarly, and we'll talk about this also, but like her general elemental burst is a big heal, and it's based off her max HP. So then you have to, use E to take yourself back down, as well as maybe even take some damage to stay below that 50% threshold. So I think for some people that will be a chore and not enjoyable, and you have to ask yourself if you're going to be okay and comfortable playing at below half health, because otherwise you're giving up a ton of damage on her, especially if you're using Staff of Homa, which is the 5-star spear that a lot of people will be equipping with her. Okay, C1 and C2 offer some big quality of life improvements, increasing her base cost. To me, this is a con, even though you might be thinking, okay, C1, C2 are pretty accessible because they're at the front end of the constellation. I actually think that the fact that they have such a big impact on her playstyle is not good, because it makes me, even though I'm enjoying her at C0, it makes me hesitant to recommend C0 and to tell people, hey, maybe C1, C2 is a little bit better. And I promise you, by the way, I've been using her C0. It's totally fine. You can totally make it work. Let's talk about why C1 and C2 are good. So Constellation 1 removes stamina cost off your charge attacks when your elemental skill is active. You'll play with her at C0 and you'll see immediately that, oh, I need to pay attention to my stamina costs again, which you probably haven't done in a while unless you're playing like a Catalyst user who's doing a lot of jump animation canceling to attack, right? And so having to pay attention to stamina again kind of sucks. And also there's some areas that drain stamina that make that very difficult. You don't really want to lose access to the charge attack during the elemental skill, because it's the primary source of nuking damage in the elemental skill. It's also how you apply Blood Blossoms. So C1 becomes really good for that, but again, like that's steep cost for some people. And then C2 actually has somewhat of a similar problem, where for C2, for snapshot reasons, you're gonna want that C2. Okay, so and what I mean by that is like for C2, what it does is it adds HP damage scaling. So scaling on your Blossom, you get extra damage on your Blossom based on your max HP. The reason this is important is that extra scaling is fixed. Okay, so it's fixed extra damage on your Blossom. Your Blossom's damage naturally is not fixed. It's not snapshot when you cast it. So when you first cast it, it's going to be really high because your elemental skill's active. You've got this crazy steroid, right, of attack power because of it being active. When it goes inactive, the Blood Blossom's damage takes a huge drop off, right? It doesn't snapshot. I don't know if that's a bug. I don't know if they're going to fix that or if that's intended. All I know is that the C2 is better for adding that missing damage that you're having. I don't feel like it's quite as necessary for playstyle as C1, but it definitely is a huge jump in quality of life for Hu Tao. So I think, again, just to summarize, having C1 and C2 offer big quality of life improvements. While some people may consider that a pro, I think it's a con because it raises the base cost of the character for some players. Okay. Things that I'm neutral about that you should know. First, the elemental skill drains a percentage of your current health, where the elemental burst heals based on your max HP. It's just something good to know. Also, practical downtime works much better than I expected. The downtime between activating the elemental skill and then being able to activate the elemental skill again is 7 seconds. And when I read that originally, I thought, oh man, this is going to be a pain. You're going to need, like, this is only a burst character. You're going to need another primary damage dealer to support this character. And not true. I was wrong for thinking that. 7 seconds goes super fast. Like if you have Hu Tao and let's say you switch over to Chongyun and you use Chongyun's elemental burst, and maybe you drop the elemental skill and then you switch back, your elemental skill will basically almost be back off cooldown. It depends on how fast you do it. If you're slow at it, it will be back off cooldown. If you are able to execute on all that really fast, it will be very close to like 1 or 2 seconds before it's off cooldown. So I think that 7 seconds of downtime is actually really not that bad, as long as you have another character to rotate between and do some casting on during that downtime, which I think you'd want to do anyways. So that's pretty cool, and that increased the versatility, and it's just something you should know. And then also the other thing is, and we talked about this already earlier in the video, but like you need to play around elemental reactions with this character. If you don't play around elemental reactions, the character is not going to feel very strong. You're going to be like, why does everybody think this character's good? This character feels lackluster. This character requires elemental reactions to feel great. If you play around it, it's going to feel amazing. You have a lot of options for playing around. A lot of cryo characters, a lot of hydro characters, but you do need to use elemental reactions with Hu Tao. Okay, let's talk about teams, preferred teams. So I'll be making a guide later on Hu Tao, but just to kind of get you started, if you're considering pulling on her, my favorite team so far that I've played with in single player is Hu Tao and Ganyu paired together. And for co-op, it's Hu Tao and Childe paired together, which I showed you at the start of the video with me on Childe and Starmie on Hu Tao. It's pretty cool, actually, footage, so hopefully you like that. Look, there's lots of cryo and hydro supports you can use to get behind that. So, you know, Diona is really great, has shields. You can look at Xingqiu, you can look at Chongyun, at Kea. You know, all of those characters are good options. Mona, of course, right? If you're trying to do big damage, if you're going for you know, the one-shot builds, it's the standard comp, right? It's like Mona, Bennett, Sucrose, and then a damage dealer, right? So it's the same here. So just keep that in mind. There's some really cool opportunities for support, but for single player, Hu Tao and Ganyu. For co-op, Hu Tao and Childe. Those are my favorite picks. Okay, and then also I strongly recommend bringing some kind of shield if you can. Zhongli is obviously the best, but if you don't have Zhongli, then you can consider, you know, Diona is a really good second. Noelle has a shield. I think Xinyan's shield's probably a little too weak for what you're gonna need unless you're fighting pyro content. But why are you fighting pyro content with pyro characters? It's kind of weird. So yeah, so I would say probably those first three are good options if you're having trouble surviving at low HP, or you want just like a little bit of additional help or safety net when you're fighting. And Diona's great too, because right, Diona synergizes with cryo, so you can get some cryo application, which is really, really cool. And unfortunately, you won't be able to take advantage of Diona's C6 because it requires you to be above half health to get the EM. So it's like kind of weird, yeah. But anyways, there's still good synergies there, again, for just applying cryo and doing big one shots. Okay. Should you pull? This is probably the part you wanted at the very beginning of the video, but yeah, here it is at the end after I talk about everything else. For free to play and low spenders, she is good at Constellation 0, and she has a ton of weapon options. Okay, there's like something like 13 or 14 polearms in the game right now. It's insane. That's just at the, I don't know if I counted 1-star, 2-star on that. I think that's just at the 4-star, 5-star level. You have a lot of options. Okay, you have a lot of options. You probably have some polearms, and you're probably not necessarily using them. So you have a lot of weapon things that you can do on Hu Tao. Obviously, Staff of Homa is the best, but there are other things you can use as well. Jade Spear. You know, pretty much any of the 5-stars work. And then on the 4-star deathmatch, right, it seems really, really nice. You could look at Blackcliff. And you can look at some of the other ones. The non-physical polearms are worth taking a look at. So yeah, I think that makes her pretty nice to pull, and I've enjoyed her at C0. So I feel like I'm very comfortable recommending her to you and saying yes, you should pull her if you like her playstyle. You need to be comfortable managing stamina without C1. If you don't want to have to manage stamina, you do not pull for this character. There will be other characters that will be strong damage dealers that won't require you to manage stamina. 100% they are coming. So like, don't get caught up in the hype and be like, oh man, everybody's got Hu Tao, everybody's playing Hu Tao, I gotta pull Hu Tao. No, if the idea of managing stamina sounds atrocious to you and you're not willing to pony up for C1, do not pull this character. You're not going to have a good time. You're not going to be very happy, okay? You have to be all right with the stamina management, and you have to be all right with the playstyle, right? Charge attacks with E active, switch into a burst, switch out. Charge attacks with E active, switch into the burst, switch out, okay? That's the playstyle. That sounds fun to you? Go ahead and pull. She's good at C0, but you're going to need to manage that stamina, all right? Probably will work very well with Rosaria when she releases. I think maybe next patch. I don't know. There's no confirmed release date for Rosaria. But if Rosaria comes out next patch, you know, she's a cryo character. She's got some nukes. I think they'll actually have some nice synergy together. So if you're thinking about, hey, I really want to play Rosaria as like one of my main characters and have Hu Tao support Rosaria, that's an option for you. And again, I can't know until I play Rosaria, but my theory is that they'll synergize quite well together. And again, Hu Tao feels a little bit more future-proof to me than some other DPS options due to the shared crit rate buff that applies to the team, and then also to the fact that she applies Blood Blossoms, which makes it easier for you to rotate to a Hydro Cryo and detonate the Pyro that is applied from those Blood Blossoms. I actually think that's really, really cool. So yeah, so my vote is yes, but only if you like the playstyle and only if you're okay with stamina management, if you're not going to C1. What about whales? What about the big spenders, the Poseidons? Should you pull deep? For whales and big spenders, I would definitely tell you to pull to at least Constellation 2 to unlock her complete kit. I think you leave too much on the table, not getting C1, not getting C2. The stamina management is annoying. I won't lie to you. I think maybe with time I could get used to it, but I find it to be a little bit annoying. And I think the extra damage on the Blood Blossoms is worthwhile. I've seen some Blood Blossoms hit crazy 5-figure numbers. So maybe even 6 figures in one of the attacks, but I can't actually remember. So yeah, definitely worthwhile to get to at least C2. I think you could go to C4 if you want to help future-proof her a little bit. If you're like, hey, I'm not sure if I'm going to want to wail out on every character that comes out. Should I take her to C4 for this extra crit rate buff? 24% crit rate's nice. It's going to help keep her relevant on other team comps as new, stronger characters release. But it's double the investment. So I think I'm pretty comfortable telling you like your minimum should be C2, but to go to C4, yeah, that's gonna have to be up to you on how worried you are about future-proofing the character. For C6, I think you can skip it unless you're interested in speedrunning. If you want to do speedrunning, if you want to do meme damage, C6 is really going to help you out a lot. It's not a requirement. C5 would be the cap requirement for that, right? Just so you have all the damage. C6 is just going to give you that crit rate, right? So if you don't want to be sitting there, if anybody who's ever tried to make like big hit damage, right? These nuke videos you see on YouTube for like 1+ million, right? That it doesn't happen every time. It's not like that's a easily reproducible thing, right? Sometimes it could take 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours retrying with a very low crit rate but high stats everywhere else to try and get that footage, right? With C6, you don't have to worry about that because you're just going to get 100% crit rate. So you can optimize everything and reliably do it. That's pretty cool, right? That makes it like an actual build versus just something you do for a video. So that's wild. And you really may be interested in doing that. But again, that's for speedrunning. If you're like, nah, I don't really care about speedrunning. I just want to have like a lot of characters that are strong that I can enjoy. And I don't really need to like drop down and hit for like over 1 million damage, then reliably, right? Then you can pass on C6. And remember, it also has a 60-second cooldown, so it's not like you're going to do it time and time and time again, right? You're going to do it once, which is probably all you need to clear an entire floor. But if you're thinking about taking it to like a place where there's 2 spawn waves, right? Let's say there's a floor of Abyss that has 2 spawn waves in the future versus what's happening on floor 12 right now. You're going to do it once and then it's done, and you're not going to be able to do it again. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Okay. And then, honestly, I think that kind of covers all the different categories for pulling, right? So quick recap, right? Should free-to-play and low spenders pull? Yes, if you like the playstyle and you're okay with managing stamina. The playstyle being, again, activating elemental skill, using charge attacks, then activating elemental burst, rotate to somebody else, then repeat, okay? And for big spenders, whales, Poseidons, etc., I say the minimum for you is Constellation 2. That's where you pull to. And then anything beyond that is just kind of up to you on your personal preference for needing extra damage. Do you want to speed run? And also, do you want to add a little bit of extra insurance to future-proofing this character before she gets power crept by some other future release, which is almost guaranteed to happen. All right. Hopefully this was helpful for you. It's a longer first impression video than I normally do, but there was a lot to go over. If you liked the video and it's your first time here, I hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel and enabling alerts. And yeah, if you want to check out the C6 action, I'll be streaming later on today live on Twitch starting at 9 p.m. New York time and going till about 3 in the morning. All right. That's all I got. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate all the support that you've been giving on the channel. We've been growing steady, and hope you'll keep coming back and telling your friends about the content that I'm producing. All right. Talk to you soon. See ya.